bodies, like with tattoos or piercings or even like clothes or something like that.
You know, some years ago, I think it was last week, we talked about dance and various forms of expressions. You know, sometimes there is this capacity in us to forget things. I mean, Lilac knows this very much better than I, perhaps, that when I had my heart surgery, I would say to myself, I'm never going to go near sugar, fatty foods. I'm always going to exercise, go for walks every day, and I've done the best I could, you know. But there are moments where you just forget, and you find yourself swimming in eclairs and chocolate cakes. And even though there is this force inside that says, go for a walk, you know, you say, no, it's okay, I'll survive. And so one of the ways to combat forgetfulness is by creating various expressions, having pictures around, even though at a certain point, even those pictures, those forms of expression would lose their power over you, you know. Once something becomes watered down, you know, you have your mom, you don't appreciate her. She dies. You go into this state of mourning where you're just grieving every single day. And as a way to cope with the sadness or the sorrow, you go to a tattoo shop and you have someone stamp a tattoo on your shoulder. And the assumption is that every day where you shower and you look at your bicep and there is the image of your mom, you kind of remember her and you become thankful, or you become, I suppose, depressed for all the ways that you disappointed yourself, you disappointed your mom. But after a while, even that is forgotten. And I think, again, all forms of expression to some extent, we have a tendency of... Are you familiar with Rasputin? No, you're not. Assalamu alaikum. So what you have is this Siberian kind of peasant. And from some of the tales that have come from that particular space, he had these miraculous magical powers, you know, that you point a gun at him and you shoot him and nothing. You know, and eventually, because he had said some nasty things about the people in power, and knowing that this guy can't just be killed in an ordinary way, they just dismembered him, you know, kind of like the Titans. And he would go into these frenzies once in a while, you know, these dancing moves. And he would choose for himself specific companions, you know. And the point I suppose I'm trying to make is, let's just say I am into dancing or some sort of an art form, and I read his story and I'm inspired with the story, And what inspiration does is that it really removes you from your flesh. You know, you kind of just like walk in the clouds for a while, and then you come down. And when you come down with the memory of the experience, and you say, you know, I read this book about Carlos Castaneda, or I read this book about Irina Tweedy, and I don't want to forget. And so, despite the fact that now that you've come down, you now live in the world of conflict. You don't want to hang out with your friends, and you don't want to like go to parties and, you know, just dance, you know, like your friends do ridiculously. You want to follow the footsteps of Rasputin or some tradition we call Kailistes in like northeast Russia or somewhere, where there are rituals and their function is to make sure that you are like removed from your flesh. You have an experience that when you come down, it's very difficult to forget, and it contaminates you for the rest of your life. You know, it's like you're married to someone for 20, 30, 40 years and they die. And nobody wants to be alone in life, you know, and you go on these dating apps and you go out with these people and you realize they all suck. In some shape or form, you'd rather have your spouse back, you know, but that's not possible. So you say, you know what, I'm just going to remain a monk for the rest of my life. And so one of the ways that you say, I'm going to fend off forgetfulness and I'm going to kind of inspire the conflict even more by trying to remember that experience is by creating an image, however you want to do it. Some people do tattoos, some people paint. So it connects you to something. And I think deep down there is this desire inside all of us for, I don't know, I mean, I turn on the TV once in a while and I want to be touched by, lack of a better word, beauty, whether it comes in the form of Al Pacino or Robert De Niro or something. I just, you know, don't want to just sit there and be connected to my flesh once in a while. I want to like have an inspired moment where I walk away from the living room and I don't want to talk to my wife or I don't want to look at my kids. I just want to like, you know, have those special moments. And eventually, of course, I'll be dropped back into my physical life, regular life. And once my wife says, you know, take out the trash, it's finished. I'm back down here, you know, taking out trash and vacuuming and washing dishes. And I think all of us have this desperate need for an experience of something that transcends just the everyday tables and chairs of life. You know, I mean, I'm glad that, you know, that there came a point to his life where he said, you know what, going to the classroom no longer moves me. Playing with ideas no longer moves me the way it did when I was 20 or 30 or 40. I have a different fantasy now. Before I, you know, lose my physical mobility, I have some money. And you begin to create these fantasies about yourself, you know. I'm going to take my wife, we're going to go to Peru or Portugal, run into Cristiano Ronaldo, touch his, you know, six-pack, you know. And in some ways, what you're saying without really saying it is that life in Oakland makes me all meat and no spirit. You know, just looking at my wife in Oakland makes me more meat. And I want to go somewhere. And I want to be touched by something that this culture doesn't have. I think we're all pursuing that, you know. And I think the deeper the object of your worship, the more substance it has, the more you're going to be pursuing this carrot and the stick. You know, if you're only after sex, for example, well, it's nothing bad. There's nothing wrong with it. It does create a good amount of emotions. And since you're only 18 or 19 or 20 and you're just stupid, not because it's innate, it's just lack of experience. By the time you figure out the conflicts, which are never going to be resolved really, 2 or 3 years of your life have passed by. And so there comes a point where you go into hibernation, you come out and say, I want something that's just more than sex. You know, then you say, I want something that is sex, but also meaning. And it becomes a bit more complicated. You know, then you say sex, meaning, and like a bona fide relationship, and then a family. And then there comes a point where you say, you know what, I've had all of those. I want to go into a retirement period. I've spent a good amount of time and energy with my wife, with my kids, with my own, life. I want something different. And none of us really know what it is. All we know is that once in a while, we just want to be touched by something. And it can come in all sorts of different ways. I mean, I don't go and watch a Warriors game because I find all 50 people on the court interesting. I just go for Stephen Curry. One single guy has the power to elevate this thing we call basketball. I don't know how he does it. I don't know why I'm attracted to him and not the other players. I mean, that's the magic a mystery that I can't even touch. I don't know what happens. I don't know why I am moved by his smile, by his eyes, by his physical body, by the way he plays basketball. It's just magical, So I think if you want to kind of just reduce the human being to this very simple definition, is an entity that runs after beauty and finds it in all forms and shapes and colors. So, there was a time where the four Gospels really moved me. They were interesting. But then the Gospel of Judas, that was even more interesting. And so, as you grow and mature and change, the things you begin to want to worship begin to change. So, is it? Yeah, maybe not. Doesn't matter.
Is individuality important?
For those of us who are parents, which is really a very, very sad experience, for those of us who are parents, we soon come to realize that kids demand autonomy and individuality at such a young age. At the age of 2, they want to feed themselves, clothe themselves, bathe themselves, run in the streets by themselves. And you come to realize, well, there is nothing wrong with being creative, and there's nothing wrong with being an individual, and there's nothing wrong with being autonomous. It's just a wrong stage for that, And so our last resort, after a good amount of reasoning with our children, calmly, sometimes scream, then comes the hand, spare the rod, spoil the child. You slap them, you kick them, you punch them, you beat the crap out of them, hoping that, they're just not going to run on the street, And so we make sure that they remain codependent. And there is nothing wrong with that. Because as a parent, you know that codependency is good. One of the things that we do as human beings, we're like this amazing copy machines. And you just hope that you copy the good things, and you hope, at least this used to be the case for the longest time in human history, the first people you copy are your parents. And then, of course, your relatives, and then, down the line. And so that particular codependency is really, 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 really good, okay? And then there comes a point where parents allow you to kind of experiment with things on your own. They realize, like, your daughter comes in and says, I want to make a cake. Fine, you know where the eggs are, you know where the blender is, knock yourself out. And the entire kitchen is a mess, But at least you know that they're not going to put their head in the blender, that they're not going to stab themselves with a knife. And so I think when it comes to like crafts, like art, one of the, I think, illusions that we have about ourselves is the following. If you want to learn how to play the piano, you will still learn that you need someone who's been there, who's done that. That this person will sit you down and go through the steps with you for the next 5, 6, 7 years until you learn how to play the piano. If you want to learn how to draw, there's a teacher for that. Whatever it is that you want to do, that is an expression of some creativity out there, there is a teacher for it. I think the illusion that we have is thinking requires no teachers. Life requires no teachers. You can actually wing it. Just do whatever, and eventually you'll get to the destination. And the truth is that's not the case. You can wing it. And if the Greeks are right, that the goddess Fortuna will eventually come down and says, you know what? I like Ashley. she's a complete mess. She's a moron, but I think it's time for her to kind of just grow up a little bit. And so events begin to happen in your life, and little by little you're trained to think well, to feel well, to be able to observe and pay attention to the right things at the right time, for the right reasons. But most of us, I think, it's like, you have someone graduating at the age of 18, and the world is a big, advertisement machine, and you have a friend who's a hippie, who's a loser. So you know what, I want to be like that. And your parents keep telling you, your friend is no good, don't be like that. You say, Mom, Dad, I'm an American, I'm 18. You talk to me one more time in that way, I will call the cops on you. And what do the poor parents do in this culture? Nothing. They'll back off and you'll just go out. And you'll kind of waste your life for the next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And one of the ways that we justify waste is by saying, well, if it wasn't for all those things I experienced, I wouldn't be the person I am. It's very true. You're just 90, paralyzed, incompetent. You're completely just useless. And the only thing you really have is a bucket filled with regret. You have an inspired moment where you say, I am really wise because of all the mistakes I made. That may be so, but you're still incompetent. You're just nothing but a bumper sticker. And so, time passes, you find yourself back in school at the age of like 25 or 30 or 40 or 50. Nothing wrong with that. But I think, as T.S. Eliot would say, as you will read in Ecclesiastes, that, there is a season for everything. There's nothing wrong with coming back to school at the age of 90. It just, mentally, you just don't have the capacity. Emotionally, you're kind of worn out. Physically, it's difficult to sit there for like 5 hours, listen to some idiot like me. So, look, if I was to use my own story, I would tell you the following. For whatever the reasons are, my brother, he was just disciplined. He's a number 5 in the Enneagram. He kind of is on autopilot. We were in India at the age of like 11. He would light candles and study. And I would look at him like at 2 in the morning. What the hell is this kid doing? Is he stupid? It's 2, just sleep, man. Have a good time. But no. And to this day, he's the same way. I, on the other hand, complete loser. I still am. Anything that requires discipline, I just run away from. And so at the age of 18 or 19, I just ran into this man with a bushy mustache, and he had a very brute force to him. Little by little, I grew to like him. And what little desires I had about tennis, about soccer, about chess, about music, they all disappeared. He consumed every space I had within me. I just fell in love with him. And he asked me, what are you doing? I'm playing tennis. Quit, go to school. Okay. And little by little he took control over my entire life. And for the next 10 years. And then I realized, I like doing philosophy. I never thought about coming into the classroom and teaching, But I always tell my parents, if it wasn't for Hussein, I would have probably ended up in prison because I like to steal things. I still do, when no one's looking. And when I think back and I pay attention to all the steps that I took, I realize it was really good for me at the age of 18 to have no independence, to be completely dependent on another human being who had richer life experiences, and for me to be attracted to those type of experiences. It allowed me to be more focused about school, to, hang out with losers less, give up music, give up soccer, give up tennis, give up everything. Just sit in my room and read and read and read and read. And stay single till I was like 80. And because of, I suppose, him and my codependency on him, I walked into the classroom and it was a shot in the dark. You have no idea if it's going to be good or bad, if students are going to like you or despise you. It seemed that, the way I was, my temperament, my way of expressing ideas was something that the students kind of liked, enjoyed. Of, 10 who enjoyed philosophy and humanities, majored, and now teach. So is individuality good? It depends at what stage. You know, I don't like to read books anymore. I don't find ideas interesting. I like to be inspired so ideas can ooze out of me. But I don't like to be a plagiarist of ideas. That stage for me is past. Are there going to be moments where I find myself in this desert where I am not inspired to generate ideas? I'm not inspired to have emotions that inspire me and generate thoughts? Yeah. Do I desperately look for a book to read or an audio to listen to be inspired? Absolutely. Can I find them? No. Do I get sad and depressed? Yeah. Do I become sometimes angry? Yeah. Do I want codependency? Do I sometimes wish I didn't have a teacher at the age of 18, so maybe now I could go on a quest to look for a teacher who can inspire me? Yeah. It's a fantasy. I can no longer have those things because I'm way too contaminated at this age and my experiences, you know. So being an individual, if you go to the dictionary and look up the word, it means indivisible. It's a whole unit. It's unfragmented. It cannot be broken into 10, 20 different pieces. It's one whole piece. And it means, if you go back to some of the conversations we've had, it means that your body and your emotions and your thoughts, as well as your spirit, if there is anything like that, they all come together, join forces, you know. If you look at the book of Job in the Old Testament, which happens to be perhaps the oldest book of the 38 books of the Old Testament, it says, "In my house you will find many mansions." And it's a very strange statement because you oftentimes find houses in mansions, not the other way around. You know, and yet in this particular book, the phrasing is very interesting, that you can actually find mansions in houses or in a house. So if you go back to some of the things we wrote on the board, that there is this place inside you called the iron. That's about immediate pleasures that you want, and you want them to be gratified. Then you have the power pleasure. Then you have the relationship pleasures. Then you have the intellect. At a certain point, for you to become an individual. Now, the way it usually works for us is that I want to talk about Plato's idea of, say, the cave, for example, or his idea about epistemology or knowledge. What is knowledge? How is it different from opinion? But my emotions tell me, today, just wing it, be free. Forget the curriculum for a moment. Forget if a student is going to complain and go to the dean. Just go with the feelings. And what you have is the intellect now fights with my emotions. Okay? An individual says, you know what? What my mind wants is what my emotions want. And what my mind and emotions want are in fact what my spirit wants. And I'm going to take my body to where my emotions, my spirit, and my intellect desire. And what you now have is a unified human being who comes to class. And now physically I am embodied, emotionally I'm embodied, intellectually I'm embodied, and I'm also guided by my soul or spirit, if there is again such a thing. Now that becomes an individual. The way we are is, I am with my wife, but I'm thinking about Angelina Jolie. Okay? I'm talking with my colleague about curriculum development, and there's a part of me that says this is a complete waste of time. I am here, but I'm thinking about retirement. And so you realize that you're just all over the place. And it really does take a long, long time. We're kind of like magnifying glasses in the sense that if you really want to apply a good amount of heat towards one single object, you have to kind of hold the magnifying glass in a particular way that all the forces that you're trying to harness in this glass, just one pointed, a single point at a single thing, and then smoke will come out. If the forces are just all over the place, nothing is going to happen. And I think we are very much the same way. That because of variety of conflicting desires inside us, because of our inability to think coherently, and most importantly, because there is no passion inside us. And I think you can just reduce everything to that. We don't really love anything. We like a lot of things. We want a lot of things, but our want has no need in it. And the moment a want turns into a need, you're in trouble. Because a good amount of things that are out there trying to tempt you, this need is kind of like getting pregnant. You have like almost like 500,000 sperms going towards the egg. And it's the egg that's pulling the eggs, pulling the sperms. And once the egg captures the sperm that she likes, the gates close. The rest of the sperms, they just end up in hell. And I think that's what passion and love does. And if you happen to slowly find yourself becoming codependent, that you like something, and that like has turned into a want, and that want has turned into a need, you soon come to realize you're less interested in other things. And that could be devastating for those of us who have other areas of life that needs tending to. I mean, you're in a relationship. Imagine if you began to like someone. Jeez, that'd be awful. Imagine if you began to like them even more. Then you would probably just sabotage your relationship. Which is not a bad thing after all. So, is it? Yeah. Yeah, no one can be an individual. It's not possible. You need someone from the outside. Unless you happen to be, again, gifted like a Magnus Carlsen or a Cristiano Ronaldo. Have you seen his belly? Have you ever checked him out? Oh man, half of your life is a waste. Go. After this class, YouTube him. He's amazing. He is married with like 50 kids. Anyone else? Allahu Akbar. Justin.
Why'd you shave your beard?
I looked old. And nobody was paying me attention. Not even my wife. I know it's awful. So I shaved. I thought maybe if I shave, then I'll get some attention. Didn't happen.
Oh, didn't work out.
There's a story that comes to us from Rumi. You guys know who Rumi is? So there is this 80-year-old man who's about to marry this 18-year-old. Think of that. And so they go to this old man and say, listen, you're going to ruin her life. Why don't you marry someone your own age, like 25? Maybe 30, maybe 40, 50. Why, 18-year-old? Just leave her alone. So, no, I love her. You're 90, you're almost dead. He just doesn't listen, So his friends go to the store like Safeway and buy a donkey. Really like old donkey. The donkey's blind and deaf, limping, and all of his hair, if that's what you call it, is gray. So they go to Home Depot and they buy a bucket of paint, like black paint, and they begin to paint this donkey, like black, so he could look young. And so this old man goes to them and says, what are you guys doing to the donkey? Why are you painting the donkey black? Well, because we want to sell him, at Trader Joe's. But it doesn't matter what you do to the donkey. He's still going to look old. Whether he's limping or not, whether, the hair is dyed black, there's just something about the donkey that says, I'm like 90, almost dead. No one's going to buy the donkey for $1 million. You're lucky if you get $25 for it. And so the guy looks at him and says, well, that's your story, isn't it? And then he says, now I get it. And that's one of the things about cultures that tell a lot of stories, that we don't really learn directly. In other words, if I was to tell you, don't go out with Janet, for example, you're never going to understand what I'm talking about. So what I will do, I will go out with someone that has the same qualities that your girlfriend has. And so when you come home, you realize a complete mess. And then when you call Janet, you realize, well, Janet resembles my companion. Then you will dump Janet because you don't want to end up like me. And once you've understood, I'll dump my companion as well. Indirect language. Anyways.
Well, it's a little boring, but I was wondering if we could, been working on an assignment,
Sorry to hear that.
and yeah, I know, it's ruining my life. The part about the
What kind of pills are those?
ibuprofen,
Oh. Okay.
sick pills. Thank you.
Do them yourself?
No, definitely not. I don't have the talent or the
How much?
supplies to do this. I think it was a 50.
That's it? Please.
Sorry. A couple of the videos, I understand what lessons I can glean from them, and then a couple of them, I don't actually know how to apply the steps to my life. Or maybe it's just that I'm having trouble connecting with them, or like, for example, like the Adam and Eve like, story.
Okay.
What sort of lessons, like, to me, that the theme is darkness. So the steps, how do I make that applicable? Like, do I want to apply more darkness into my life, or am I trying to avoid the darkness? Or,
Okay. As always, I'm going to create a story. My apologies if it happens to be X-rated. So let's just say that metaphorically and symbolically, Adam represents power and control. You know where your life is going. Okay. So let's do it this way. Let's say you have a boyfriend and his name happens to be Skyler. Okay. You have a future with him. You guys share the same roof, same bed, bank account. Your life is set. Okay. You know who you are, what you are, to whom you belong, who owns you, and all that. That's Adam. And you've been trained well in the sense that your mom was a Muslim, your dad was a Christian. And since you have a companion, there are certain lines you should never cross. So you come to class. And to your right is Jason. Look at him. He's a little sleepy, but he's a nice looking man. Okay. You love Skylar. Just last night, the two of you were talking about having babies, like 50 of them, like Cristiano Ronaldo. Okay. And you looked at the bank account, you realized you got like about 200,000 in savings, and you want to like move to Sacramento to buy a house. So you know what trees you can go towards and what tree you shouldn't go towards. But there is something about us. You know, Woody Allen made this movie, and Woody Allen is a interesting little tiny of a man. He made this movie called Whatever Works. And Woody Allen is like a closet existentialist. And existentialism it's interesting from what it was with the birth of Gilgamesh to what it became around the 19th century, when cities grew, became really vast, when advertisements were no longer coming from the church, but from Snoop Dogg and Justin Timberlake. that the culture just slowly robbed meaning from people's lives. All you had was a skin, and there was no meat in it. It's like there is this beautiful orange on this branch, and it's so tempting, and you walk to it, and you grab it, and you peel it, only to realize it's empty. That's modern life for you. And so from 19th century on, what happened is all these thinkers, whether it's Heidegger or Sartre or Simone de Beauvoir, came forth and said, you know what? Suck the marrow out of life. The truth is, it's not possible. Life has nothing to be sucked out of. There is nothing left. So all we have is just like porn, drugs, football, UFC, is cheap shows of life. There is nothing meaning that demands like things that are of value to you that need to be sacrificed. Kind of like Abraham and Ishmael, or Abraham or Isaac. There was a guy that they captured after World War II. He was Japanese. He didn't know that the war was over. He was still going around like destroying things. Eventually, he was found, he was brought back. He was deemed a hero. And then he said, I don't understand these modern kids. We sacrificed our lives for justice, for ideas that had nobility in them. People now fight to go see Dave Chappelle. People now fight to go see Rihanna, Justin Timberlake, Taylor Swift. I mean, the sort of lives that people live today, it's ridiculous. But all those things aside. So there is, again, remember, your life is full of control, and you have control because you have power. Now, do not dismiss the importance of power. If he was physically not well, his money would be worthless. His fantasies about going to Portugal and Peru would have of no value. The only place he would probably visit would be Kaiser. So power, without power, there isn't anything you can do in life. It's impossible. Okay? So your life with Skylar is filled with power and control. You know how your future is going to unfold. Now, there is something to be said about long-term relationships, whether it's with a companion or with life. It eventually turns into groundhog. You do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And though there are moments where it's exciting and there are moments there is a good amount of inspiration in it, there is something about you says, is that it? Can there be something more? Am I just going to go to classroom, talk about Plato, and go home and imagine that I've done something interesting? And so there is nothing wrong with your relationship. But for some strange reason, just Jason does something to you, and you don't really know what it is. That's the forbidden tree. That's the tree you shouldn't go near. And if you go near it, don't touch it. If you touch it, don't pick the fruits. If you do, don't bite it. If you do, don't chew it. If you do, don't swallow it. But here's the thing about Eve, Sheva, life giver. Life eventually sucks the life out of you. That's just given. You want a tenure track teaching position, you have it. What does time do? Crap all over it. Now you begin to fantasize about retirement. Then you go to Portugal. Now you fantasize about going back to Oakland and resting on your sofa and watching TV. That's what life does. So inasmuch as you want to remain faithful to Skylar, you look at Jason and something about you, the Eve, the part in us that desperately seeks beauty and desperately seeks to come to life, keeps like pinching you. Look at him. Look at him. You say, no, no. And you try. Instead of sitting over there, you'll sit over there. And then every time you come to class, even though you're an atheist, so to speak, You say a prayer before coming through the door. I hope he's not in the room. And the more you see him, you know, I mean, you don't really look this way right now, but the conflicts, you know, and the conflict happens only when the temptation grows bigger and stronger. It occupies more space inside you. And you go home, you know. On the way home, you call Skylar and say to him, I'm going to make your favorite dish, chicken tikka masala, without the chicken. And you're calling him for one reason. You don't want to think about Jason. You know he's slowly coming to life inside you. And he's actually making a home. And something really interesting begins to happen inside you as this passion for you. And remember passion from the word pasco, which means to suffer. You don't suffer because you want something. You don't suffer because you like something. These are things that come and go. You suffer when the want turns into a need, where now you have an emotional relationship. It's just emotions. Hands haven't touched yet. And as this emotion inside you grows, you sit on your sofa and you say, do I really want to move to Sacramento? Do I really, really want to marry Skylar? I mean, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why there is this conflict. I don't know why all of a sudden I'm beginning to doubt. Now, that, depending on the intensity of the doubt, should it grow bigger and bigger and bigger, also grows fear. Because now you're beginning to lose power. And with the loss of power, you lose control. And every time you hang out with Skylar, the man you want to marry, you keep thinking about Jason. The man you don't want to think about, but you do nevertheless. A couple of things can happen. You drop the class. And though you will drop the class and you will physically no longer see Jason, emotionally it's a different story. It's an image ingrained in your brain, in your heart, in your soul. And in as much as you want to crucify them, bury them, make sure they never resurrect, they come up. But if you're patient enough, you will forget. Your own organism, there is only so much suffering it can take, eventually shuts down. And little by little, his image will fade. Like all the other things that you have wanted and then needed and then loved and then disappeared, and you were depressed because of that. That too will disappear. The other thing that will grow your doubt and fear and maybe even uproot your life and dismantle your relationship with Skylar is you allow the serpent that keeps telling this part of you, just go to class late, like 9:05, and you'll be far too shy to like walk over there. There's a chair there. Just sit next to him. So instead of rejecting that particular passion, you actually walk towards it. You could have passion for someone like Brad Pitt. Nothing wrong with that. Passion is passion. You could have passion for someone like a Socrates. And as we talked about this time ago, Brad Pitt is like a 7-Eleven. It has some items. Most are expired, hoping that people don't look at the expiration dates, right? And there are only like a select few items that they have. Socrates, on the other hand, Socrates is like a Costco. It's like a zoo. You could like stay there for like weeks, if not years, looking at like 5,000 different TVs and 5,000 different kinds of mushrooms and asparagus and lettuce. So it's never ending. So the passion that Brad Pitt will generate will last about maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks before it expires. Socrates, it's different. The other difference between Socrates and Brad Pitt is the following. If you fall in love with Brad Pitt and you walk away from your relationship with Skylar, eventually you will heal and you will get a dating app and you will date someone out there. If you fall in love with Socrates, you can't digest life the way it is anymore. You live outside of life. And once in a while you walk into life to see if there are anything in life that you can use to your advantage. Since life can no longer give you meaning, it is now your job to go into life, pick a few things that look interesting, and then breathe life into them. Does that? No, you're talking about the steps. Okay. If I was to use that example and give you the steps, I would say the following. Again, forgive my story or analogy, but these are the only ways I know how. Let's say that every time you come to class, your hand goes up. You ask a question. So, here goes again. I listen. I try my best. Something about me says, I like her questions. And something about you says, I like his answers. And now we have a relationship. Now, I'm not a 20-year-old instructor. I'm not a 30-year-old or 40-year-old. I'm close to death. Okay? And I say to myself, I am really interested in people who enjoy these ideas, especially if they're seasoned in this particular way. So I say, if you have more questions, come to the office. So I'm telling you where the tree is. Then you come to the office, you sit for 10 minutes. You don't really know what to do in the office, you feel a little nervous. Then I say, just in case, these ideas don't mesh well in your brain, here's my number. Text me if you want, it's okay. Email me if you want, that's okay too. Then you text. Now, you may not know what's going on. Okay. You may think like I'm just like ordinary chap, just giving you my number and telling you come here, come there. But these are steps to getting you infected. You know how you get like the flu and you stay in bed and you can't do anything? This is no different. Okay. Right now, you think about these ideas 5 minutes throughout the day. Well, once infected, it's about 20 hours a day. It comes to a point where you can't really eat your food in peace, rest in peace, hang out with your friends in peace. These ideas have now taken a good amount of space inside you. But what you need to understand is you don't really like the ideas. What you're beginning to like is the person who's sharing those ideas with you. You're not going to like Platonic ideas. That's stupid. You're going to first like Plato. And then 20 years from now, then you will understand the ideas of Plato. Then you will like them. Right now, you can only like the person. But then you go, so, this doesn't make any sense. I went there for philosophy. I can't like that guy. First, he's almost 90. Second, he's my professor. Third, it's illegal. fourth, it's like blasphemous. Now again, this is how you compute things. Okay? And as you begin to text me like once a day, and then email me once every other day, and then I come to campus around 4:15 and I see you outside of the tower buildings. What the hell are you doing here? Well, you know, I was thinking about this idea. No, it's not true. You're not here about the idea. It's okay, let's go up. I'll make you a cup of coffee. And then I say, listen, you know, I'm having some people come to the house Saturday. How about 6:30? And you say, well, let me give you some thought. Okay, whatever. And then you like send me a message. Can't make it. Well, you know why she took the pills that she did. Don't worry. She couldn't delay them. It's useless to take pills once the pain is there. You take them before the pain comes up. You will never know the steps. Now, so there you have it. Yeah. Pain? First, it depends what kind of a pain we're talking about. One of the things that pain does is that it really does freeze space and time. I have a friend who was diagnosed with prostate cancer some years ago. He's doing fine. He's close to being 80. And we talk maybe once a year or so. We used to have gatherings every weekend. But as you get older, you realize just, you have no tolerance for people as much anymore. So he says, I don't mind dying, but I just don't want to die with a lot of pain, you know. I think the novelty of pain comes about when the pain has diminished a little bit. You're no longer intoxicated with the anguish. Now there is some space between you and the pain. You sit back and you say, I'm really grateful that I have a healthy set of teeth. Or I'm grateful that I didn't have a stroke. I'm grateful that I'm not a burden to my parents, to my wife, to my kids, or to humanity at large. So if there is any novelty in pain, it's only when it's removed from you, where you can sit back and then appreciate, you know, what you had that pain took away from you, but now you have them back. And now you try to protect whatever it is that you want to protect so that pain doesn't come to it. No one in pain is going to say, oh, this is great. I love pain. No. You have to have found yourself in a very privileged position in life. Imagine that you've been depressed chronically, and you've even tried to commit suicide a number of times, but you weren't successful. You're taken to a place, they electric shock your brain. Little by little, you begin to forget certain things. You remember a lot of things, but forget some things. We don't know how it works. And then you come out. someone takes care of you for the next 10 years. And then for some strange reason, your life is put back together miraculously. And then you come to a classroom, you're sitting, and the person next to you talks about suicide. And all of a sudden, you remember all the pain you went through. But now you're in a very privileged position. You've been there, you've done that. So you know what you do? You retrieve that fire that lives inside you, you open it up, and you study it closely. And then you look at this chap and you say, my treat, let's go have some food. Zachary's, deep dish. And then you tell them your story. It's a painful story, but filled with wisdom and insight and experience. That's a good place to be. Anyone else before we... Marco.
I don't know if you talked about this already on Friday, but talk about the iron, the silver, the gold, etc. And I recall you said, "Oh, we'll address the final two." So that piqued my curiosity. I wanted to explain what the final two are.
Okay. I'll tell you a story since you like Jesus. There was a sect in the Christian tradition, I think it's called Panarium or something. They even have a book. It's about their secret rituals. So there is a story in one of them where Mary Magdalene, and I'm not quite sure if she actually had a historical existence, but Mary Magdalene goes to Jesus and says to him, how do I become like you? And so, I don't know if 2,000 years ago, I don't even know if the story is true, but you know, I doubt very much they had underwears. 2,000 years ago, maybe they did. But Jesus disrobes. Close your eyes and fantasize that for a moment. And then he begins to play with himself, masturbate. And then he climaxes. And he shows what is inside on the palm of his hands to Mary Magdalene. And he eats it. And he says, if you want to be like me, this is what you must do. I will masturbate, I will give it to you, and you have to eat it. Now, when you hear this, it just sounds a little blasphemous, strange. It sounds crude, it sounds disrespectful. But for someone like Jesus or the Buddha or Muhammad, duality doesn't exist. Since we were talking about the creative arts, specifically dancing, a couple of weeks ago or last week, Rasputin had this very strange way to him. Even though he didn't much care for life, even though he didn't much care for sex, even though he didn't much care for money and power, he was very fond of gypsy music. He loved orgies because it comes from the word orgia, which means to be exalted. Like something comes down, grabs your tiny little soul and just pulls it. Your flesh is down here, your soul is like playing with the gods. And so he would go around his community while in this exalted state, pick a couple of women, maybe 5, maybe 6, maybe 2, maybe 1, and have sex with them. Now, you and I have a certain idea as to what a teacher should look like, what spiritual people should look like, and how they should behave. For them, such moral codes don't exist. It's like all of life is like this spiritual bucket, if you will, that they can use it however way they wish. You know, I don't know if you have a companion. Initially, when you meet someone, there's a good amount of shame about you, respect about you. As the two of you become a bit more comfortable with one another. Hello, Abi. Before I forget, Saturday, 6:30. I mean 6, not 6:30, 6. Okay. So, what was I? Yes. There comes a point where you guys take a shower together, but when you come out, you still put the towel around you because the naked body is a bit too much. There comes a point where your relationship is so comfortable, you know, and she knows that when you look at her, you don't objectify her. You don't put a price tag on her. Sex is not your only objective in this relationship. She'll walk around naked, and she won't feel shame, and you won't feel shame. How did it happen that some guy like you, profoundly modest, reserved, filled with shame and religiosity, you're willing to walk around naked with your companion in your bedroom? Because nakedness is no longer blasphemous. And that's a very tiny, cheesy, superficial example I'm giving you. When you talk about people like the Buddha, Muhammad, all these other people, Malcolm X, none of the stuff that you and I worry about worries them. Malcolm X is a father when he's home, but when he's on the stage talking to people, he's a single man. He's not a married man, and he's not a father. So our moral codes is good for the civilized world. For someone like Gilgamesh or Enkidu, they don't exist. They're kind of like Trump. They defy the laws of gravity. Alright. Anyone else before we? Yeah.
I slowly love myself.
Ah.
That inspiration. One of my favorite philosophers, faced with people together and say, reason through this we Einstein help people try to argue the world of politicians. Not figure out a way to get past it. I wish today there was somebody just in our country. It's absolutely violence. Better to recognize the things about the story, whether they're things that was not related to see those binds us.
I was defending my doctorate when I think Iraq war took place. It was like outside of the room where the committee was talking about nonsense. I had half hour to prepare to get in and, and all of a sudden I hear that the bombs are being dropped. I'm not from Iraq, but I am from the Middle East, and Iraq happens to be our neighbor. And my defense was about Krishnamurti, some Indian philosopher who was thought to be the Messiah of the 20th century. I found the entire thing ridiculous. Going there, talking about Krishnamurti, pretending that I understand, pretending that these people actually care, that the doctorate really means anything. I packed up my stuff and went home. And I was angry. And it was a time I was still physically washing cars at my parents' car wash. And we had some American customers. And they would express how happy they were that Iraq was being bombed. I think there are a couple of things about Russell, about people like David Hume, Immanuel Kant, Jesus Christ. If you live outside of life, it's easy to talk about detachment. It's easy to talk about universal ideas. I can't live outside of life. I am very much attached to my family, to my parents. If any harm comes to them, I will do what I can to protect them. If that means that I will sell my house to put my father somewhere where there's a cure, I have no problem doing it. I don't care how my wife feels. I don't care how my kids feel. There is a sense of possessiveness that lives inside us. I possess my body. When I get sick, I am angry. I'm not like a Krishnamurti. I'm not like the Buddha. I am possessive. I am attached. And it's good to be attached. David Hume, who is the Scottish philosopher, would say often that why is it that parents love their kids and find it difficult to love other people's kids? Well, it's easy for David Hume to say that because he was never married and because he never had kids. It's easy for someone who has zero money to say money is evil. Why do you have money? Why do you pursue money? Well, fine. Once you go get a job, save your money and then give it away. If you don't have something, it's easy to demonize it. Your land, wherever you live, geographically speaking, every land is brutalized by the events of life. And every land and the people that occupy that land have no choice but to try to create a set of narratives that give meaning as to why earthquake happened. So Jerry Falwell, some years ago, right, when some city was underwater, they would say it's because the gay people, right? So that's what we do. We like to create stories because it gives us meaning and it gives us power. And when I was born, some 60 some years ago, there are these stories set in stone in my culture that, Amir, you're going to be a Muslim, not a Buddhist, not a Hindu. Amir, these are your parents. Amir, the street is your playground. Amir, when you go to the store, just give the owner your last name and tell him that your father, Mr. Sabzavari, will pay you when he comes back. But right now, you need 5 Cokes. Okay? And then when I walk the streets, I hear the call to prayer. When I walk the streets, I see women dress modestly. When we have gatherings, we only talk about politics and religion. That's the set of advertisement given to you by my land. So when someone attacks my land, they're also attacking all the stories that live inside my land. And these are good stories. They're not stories that give birth to Justin Timberlake or the Dadaist movement. Okay? They don't give birth to like a Burning Man ceremony of sorts. Okay? Not that they don't have value or benefit, but not that much. Okay? And given that these narratives have kept a people alive and healthy psychologically and emotionally, families are intact, depression is low, sadness is everywhere, but not depression. you say, well, these stories actually have value. And so when someone attacks them, well, you kind of say, you know, you're not just attacking a piece of land in the middle of nowhere. It's all the stories that live inside me, you know. So there is this sense of possessiveness that I think it just lives inside us. I mean, you have to be profoundly enlightened, and I don't know what exactly that means, to kind of look at everyone and say, I love you, and I love you, and I love you. And I love you the same way I love my wife. You know, I think such people are just nuts. I think Sigmund Freud correctly assessed the situation, looked at St. Francis of Assisi and said, you know, the guy crazy. You know, you can't love a loser and a winner equally, you know, because in one, the kingdom of God has risen. In the other, it's the kingdom of shit that has risen. How could you love both of them? The kingdom of shit guy could have potential. But that potential is like way under an avalanche of garbage. You know. There is also this thing about us, and I think it's just hardwired. I don't know if it's given to us by God that such a thing exists, or biological and psychological evolution. Our desire for revenge is rooted in our desire for justice. If I was to disrespect your child in this room, well, that angers you. That should anger you. And you should find a way to seek revenge. That's the only way you can exact justice. Equal the balance, the scale. And I think it's fair, you know. And this idea that if someone slaps you on the right cheek off of the left, it just makes no sense. There is this other aspect to it, which is, you know, my classes were laced with profanities for many, 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 many years. And I think it was a sign of frustration on my part. It was a sign that I wanted attention from my students. I wanted to create an environment where I share the same language as 18-year-olds. If every other word is a profanity, well, I can be the same way. And then we can be pals. Right? So the power that was given to me by the school, by my degrees, allowed me to kind of just come to class and just be stupid. As time passed, I realized I no longer want to be intoxicated with my power in that particular way. You know, and part of it has to do with just age. There is something that happens to you with power. You know, it's like drinking, and then you get drunk, you know, and you have a lot of fun while drunk. You don't care if you get into fights with Mike Tyson, you know, like 5 of them at the same time. And it's only when you puke where you say, man, you know, I wasted all that money, all that energy, drinking, all this crap, and now I'm puking. So much pain. I'm never going to do it again. I think what happens, especially when you have power in any sort of a way, on any branch in life, there's a stage where you covet it. There's a stage where you have it. There is a stage where you exercise it. And there's a stage where you say, I don't want to do that anymore. What's sad, I think, is if you're intoxicated with power at the age of 70 and up or 60 and up, then that becomes problematic, you know. I think, going back to Ashley's question about individuality, I think if you're 18 in this culture where everybody's gung-ho about being an individual and doing things their own way, I think that particular form of intoxication in a country such as this, where there are lots of opportunities, and it may be true that things are never too late, there is nothing wrong with going out there, experimenting, and being beaten up by life, and then being pushed to a corner where you sit, you examine, you observe, you learn, you know, and then you pay it forward. Whatever experiences you've had now, you give it to your child, you give it to your friends. But I think when it passes a certain stage, it can become problematic. I think Russell, and anyone who's a pacifist, anyone who has all these noble ideas, that we can find peace, we can make peace. How do you look for the steps? I think without understanding the complexities of human nature and the complexities of the social structure and why it's there and how it's created, it's virtually impossible to even talk about nukes. You know, we are emotional animals. Rationality comes only to those who are able to detach themselves from emotions. I had this friend many years ago. He was a practicing Buddhist. I mean, in the real sense, you know, not one of those bumper sticker fellows. He comes home and he finds his wife with another man. Okay. Now, if you are a bumper sticker Buddhist, you know, you realize that you're just a bumper sticker, you're just enraged and you want to like kill your companion and kill the person she's with. If on the other hand, you're a practicing and a practitioner, he goes home and he looks at him and says, continue, it's okay. You know, I'll be in the kitchen making some food. I'll call my dean, tell him that the classes are canceled. And then when you guys are out, we can sit and talk. Now, before you can actually see your wife with another human being and not have your emotions come in and mess you up, it signifies that while you were married, you didn't really feel married for a long time. At least the emotions that most people have in relationships, they're absent in you. You have a husband, but you're not really attached to him. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to get angry when he doesn't take out the trash. Okay? I think Russell has good ideas. I think if Russell has done anything that was good was to rescue Ludwig Wittgenstein from the pits of depression so he could focus on language. That's it. Sorry, that's... I'm sorry, you guys have talked too much. I have a headache now. Any other questions? What time is it? What do you mean?
It's 20 after.
Where are you going to go?
Places to be.
Like where? I'm just joking. Alrighty, guys. See you Thursday.
Thank you.
Anna?